Black screen. The roar of waves pounding the shore, relentless. Then, the deep metallic slam of an iron gate closing, echoing, like the final lock on a world you can't escape. A dim yellow light spills over the barbed wire fence at Naval Station Norfolk, catching every cold, twisted strand of metal. A person can disappear inside a Navy base guarded around the clock. The real question is, how could no one see anything? This secure. Image fades in. Angelina Petra Resendiz, hair softly, framing her face, a bright smile in her Navy uniform, eyes full of trust and dreams that would never be realized. Her mother's voice trembles. They didn't even call me. I had to hear from someone else that my daughter was gone. The slow, heavy thump of a heartbeat blends with the whisper of wind through the trees. Black screen. Cold, white letters appear. Naval Station Norfolk, May 29th, 2025. She stepped out of her room, said she'd be back, and vanished. 11 days later, she was found less than a mile from the base. It was a place so quiet, you could hear a leaf hit the ground. But one thing remains, something no one has ever been able to explain. In a fortress of fences and security, cameras. How did Angelina leave this world without a sound? It was a warm afternoon in Brownsville. Sunlight poured down over the narrow asphalt streets. Somewhere nearby, bachata music drifted from an open window, blending with the smell of fresh tortillas that lingered through the neighborhood. In the middle of it all, a young woman with her long hair tied back walked quickly past small storefronts, waving and greeting everyone with that familiar, radiant smile. Angelina Petra Resendiz didn't have to try to be remembered. She left her mark through warmth and intent, energy that drew people in. Neighbors recalled her habit of stopping by the sewing shop where her mother worked, bringing coffee, sharing stories so funny that everyone forgot how tired they were. Her mother, Esmeralda Castle, was her anchor, firm but kind, always reminding her of the value of self-respect and kindness. In high school, Angelina didn't stand out for having the best grades or being the star athlete. She stood out because she knew how to bring people together. If friends argued, she was the peacemaker. If someone struggled, she quietly found ways to help. But beneath her openness was a quiet, burning dream to leave her small border town and see the world. For Angelina, joining the Navy meant more than just new horizons. It was her chance to prove that a girl from the border could wear the uniform and represent her country with pride. The day she left for basic training, she boarded the bus with cheers and tight hugs behind her, carrying her mother's last words, "No matter where you are, never forget who you are." No one then could have imagined that her journey would take her thousands of miles away to a Navy base and end in a mystery no one has been able to solve. Life in Norfolk for many young sailors was a cycle of strict discipline and empty spaces waiting to be filled. For Angelina, her first days aboard the USS James E. Williams were a true test, reporting before dawn, standing watch for hours under the blazing sun, or in shouts, the freezing wind at sea. But she adapted quickly, finding joy in small things. In the mornings, she was often the first to greet people with a smile. At night, she was the last to leave the recreation room, only after helping someone fix their uniform or listening to them unload the frustrations of the day. In the barracks, she became known as the keeper of Tausama Sahib's secrets. If you told Angelina something, it stayed with her. Friends trusted her with their fears, their private hopes. Sometimes she would turn the cramped common room into an impromptu dance floor, putting on a bachata or salsa track, pulling everyone to their feet, turning an ordinary evening into a memory. Still, there were moments when the laughter faded. Some noticed her sitting alone by the window, turning a worn family photo over in her hands. She said it was just homesickness, but there was something deeper in her eyes, like a memory she wasn't ready to touch. By late May, subtle changes began to show. She called home less. She went out at unusual hours. Sometimes she declined invitations without explanation. At the time, no one thought much of it, just small shifts in a familiar rhythm. But later, when everything had happened, Those moments would feel like the offbeat notes in a song, the ones you wish you could rewind to and listen again. In her final days before disappearing, Angelina was still present, but there was a distance and invisible space between her and the rest. In her small room, the bed was neatly made, a few notebooks stacked on her desk. Her phone, normally always in her hand, sat unused more often. Her roommate remembered one night when Angelina came, back later than usual, hair slightly tousled, not saying where she'd been. She only smiled and said she just needed some air, then quickly changed the subject. Another shipmate recalled seeing her talking in the base parking lot close to midnight with someone they didn't recognize. When asked, Angelina reassured them it was just an old friend. Strangely, that person was never seen around the base. Again, on May 29th, she was granted authorized liberty, a day off. That afternoon, Angelina put on a dark blue hoodie and left her room with a small canvas bag. A friend called out, "See you at the rec room tonight." She turned back, smiled, and said, "We'll see." It was the last time anyone saw her alive. At the time, none of it seemed important. But later, when friends pieced together their memories, these became the final markers before she vanished. Completely. And there was one more thing. Even her family didn't. No. In that final week, Angelina had received a handwritten letter. No one knew what it said, only that she read it over, and over before folding it neatly and placing it in the bottom drawer where no one else touched. That letter disappeared with her, leaving one more question no one has been able to answer. May 30th. During a routine inspection, Angelina's bed was neatly made. Her phone lay in its usual place on the desk, but she wasn't there. At first, no one panicked. She had authorized liberty. Maybe she was simply enjoying her day off. But by evening, when not a single text or call came through, concern began to creep in. A few shipmates reached out to her closest friends on his base. None of them knew where she was. Then came something strange. The night before, security. Cameras in the hallway outside her quarters had gone, offline for several hours. That window of time matched when a neighbor recalled hearing hurried footsteps and the sharp slam of a door around 1 a.m. Some witnesses claimed they'd seen Angelina on the night of May 29th, possibly in another sailor's room. Others swore they saw her the next morning. The accounts didn't match. Times and locations blurred, leaving a picture that only grew hazier the more pieces were added. When base security began searching, they swept her living area, the entry and exit points, even down to the docks. No signs of a struggle. No belongings missing other than her phone and a few personal items. The biggest mystery was how she could have left the base, where she went, and with whom. In a tightly monitored military community of siege, disappearance without a trace was almost impossible. Yet it had just happened in plain sight. Confusion spread, not just among her friends, but up the chain of command. And still, no one had officially told her family in Casern, Texas, that Angelina was missing. May 31st passed under a heavy silence. The base ran as usual, but for those closest to her, something felt undeniably wrong. A close friend checked her room again, hoping for a note, a sign, anything. But it was exactly as before. The phone she carried everywhere still sat on the desk, its screen black. The friend later said it felt like time had stopped in that room, frozen at the moment she walked out. Meanwhile, her mother, more than 1,100 miles away, still believed her daughter was going about her duties, as usual. No official word had reached her. Instead, news of Angelina's disappearance trickled only through her shipmates, wrapped in vague rumors. Some said they'd seen her near the base gate, where every vehicle is checked. Others believed someone had picked her up. No one had proof. A small internal search party extended the search into the wooded edges of the base. The first sweep came up empty. No footprints, no dropped belongings. Just quiet, broken only by rustling leaves and the smell of damp earth. That emptiness pressed on everyone. Every lead ended in another dead end, and with every passing hour, the chance of finding her safe felt smaller. On June 3rd, Virginia authorities issued a critical missing persons alert, a sign the case was no longer considered routine. For her family, it was the first time they were hearing she was missing And it hadn't come from the Navy. It came from friends, calling to ask if they'd heard anything. That shock quickly turned into a slow-burning sense of abandonment. Esmeralda Castle was in disbelief. She tried calling her daughter's unit, only to receive vague responses. It's under investigation. No details. No guidance. In Norfolk, the search intensified. Teams combed the roads around the base, parking lots, overgrown areas. Some sailors volunteered, splitting into small groups, calling her name into the night, clinging to the hope she'd answer. One recalled standing by the northern fence line during a light rain, just under a mile from a network of wooded trails, feeling they were close to something important, but unable to step beyond without orders. Investigators pulled base entry logs, but the cameras covering her housing unit were still offline during those critical early hours, leaving a gap in the timeline no one could close. From scattered witness accounts, a loose theory emerged. Angelina might have left the base at night, possibly with someone else, and ended up near the forest. But might wasn't enough to explain how, in such a controlled environment, she could disappear without anyone noticing. On June 9th, a search team outside the base discovered the body of a young woman in the woods, less than a mile from the fence. The next day, police confirmed it was Angelina. Everything seemed to stop. For her shipmates, it was grief laced with helplessness. For her family, it was a shattering of trust in the safety they thought existed. And for her hometown, it was a loss that could never be filled, along with one haunting question: what happened? In those 11 days she was gone, June 11th. After officials confirmed Angelina's death, conflicting stories began to surface. Some shipmates insisted they'd seen her on the night of May 29th, just before the housing unit cameras went dark. They said she seemed fine, showing no signs of worry or distress. But others swore they saw her the next morning, wearing different clothes and carrying a small bag. The accounts didn't match. Times, outfits, even her expression differed, making it impossible for investigators to pinpoint exactly when she was last seen alive. Adding to the puzzle, someone recalled Angelina, mentioning she was going to meet a friend off base. She never explained who. Civilian witnesses began coming forward too. One resident who lived near the East Gate told investigators they'd seen a young woman, matching Angelina's description, standing by the roadside around 11 p.m. on May 29th. She wasn't in uniform, but in jeans and a dark hoodie, looking like she was waiting for someone to pick her up. The witness said they almost stopped to ask if she was okay, but when they passed by again minutes later, she was gone. These fragments made their way into the investigation, but each time a link seemed close to connecting, another contradiction unraveled it. The fact that the security cameras went offline at the same time she was believed to have left the base only fueled speculation. Some believed it was a technical glitch. Others thought it was deliberate, someone creating a blind spot. Every new theory brought more questions than answers. And for Angelina's family, the most painful part was learning these details from the news and social media, not from the people in charge of the investigation. In the days that followed, the search widened to anyone who had contact with Angelina in her final week. One shipmate recalled that about 2 days before she vanished, Angelina received a handwritten letter. She never said who it was from or what it said, only folded it neatly and placed it in the bottom drawer of her desk. When her room was later searched, the letter was gone. No one knew when it disappeared. Some believed it might have held the key to why she left the base that night. Phone records offered no help. Her phone had gone completely silent after she left her room on May 29th. No calls, no texts, no GPS activity. For someone known for staying in touch with friends and family, that silence was deeply out of character. A close friend remembered that in the days before she vanished, Angelina seemed distracted, sometimes stopping mid-conversation, lost in thought. When asked, she brushed it off with, "I'm fine, just tired," and changed the subject. Then there was a troubling account from a civilian who lived near the northern woods beyond the base. Early one morning during the period she was missing, they heard a car engine stop briefly, followed by the sound of hurried footsteps crunching through dry leaves. When they looked out, they caught only a glimpse of someone in a dark jacket disappearing into the trees. They couldn't say if it was Angelina or if it was related, but the location was only a few hundred yards from where her body would later be found. Instead of closing in on the truth, each new piece widened the gaps. Then a new name entered the picture, Jeremiah Copeland, a fellow service member stationed at Naval Station, Norfolk. Initial reports indicated he'd been taken into custody shortly after Angelina's body was found, but no formal charges were announced. The secrecy around his detention sparked questions. If he was a witness or a suspect, why wasn't that made clear? Some shipmates recalled seeing Copeland and Angelina talking privately on several occasions. One remembered what looked like an argument. Another thought it was just a casual exchange. All of it rested on hazy memories, nothing concrete. Meanwhile, inconsistencies in the military's own initial search report troubled Angelina's family. And this exact timing of the camera outage, mismatched base, entry logs, and contradictory witness statements. To Esmeralda Castle, it felt like trying to assemble a puzzle when someone had hidden key pieces. She began reaching out to military advocacy groups, determined to push for answers. In interviews, she repeated one message: if someone can disappear like this in the most secure base in the country, it could happen to anyone. For her, finding the truth about her daughter's death wasn't just about closure. It was about making sure no other family would have to endure the same silence, the same uncertainty. But at that moment, surrounded by rumors, theories, and empty spaces in the timeline, only one thing was certain: the truth was still out there, just out of reach. June 16th, less than a week after Angelina's body was found, an internal announcement rippled through the base. Jeremiah Copeland was now officially in pretrial confinement. The news spread quickly among sailors, but came with no specific charges. The silence from investigators only deepened the unease and curiosity. To some shipmates, Copeland was a quiet, reserved figure, someone who kept to himself and rarely joined group activities. No one recalled any open conflict between him and Angelina. Still, a few people remembered seeing the two leave the common areas together at night, at least once during the week she went missing. No one knew where they went, and no one asked. In a closed-off environment like the base, having separate circles of friends wasn't unusual. But the moment his name surfaced, it became the focus of every whispered conversation. What made it even more striking was the way the information was handled. Angelina's family said the Navy never told them about Copeland's detention. They learned it from the media. For Esmeralda Castle, it was a second blow after losing her daughter, a sign she'd been shut out of the fight for justice from the very beginning. Speaking to reporters, she said, "They keep saying it's under investigation. But if they've already detained someone, doesn't that mean they know more than they're telling us?" That question haunted her, and now the public too. Those familiar with the military knew that placing someone in pretrial confinement usually meant authorities had some form of evidence or critical information. That fueled speculation that Copeland might be connected to the timeline or circumstances of Angelina's disappearance, though no one could say for sure. In the days after his name became public, the atmosphere on base turned heavy. Some sailors were shocked, describing Copeland as distant but harmless. Others recalled strange moments, like seeing him and Angelina talking in the parking lot late at night, both of them tense. One shipmate said that in the week before she disappeared, Copeland seemed more anxious than usual, glancing around frequently and speaking less. At the time, no one linked it to her. The fact that he was in confinement without charges left unanswered questions. Were investigators waiting on a critical piece of evidence, or was there sensitive information they couldn't release? For Angelina's family, the uncertainty cut deeper. Esmeralda began to see echoes of another case. Vanessa Guillen in 2020, another murdered female service member, whose early case details had also been tightly controlled. She reached out to women's rights organizations within the military community, hoping to pressure for greater transparency. Outside the base, Latino advocacy groups and military family networks started calling on the Navy to release what they knew. Inside, every rumor, every half-memory became another piece in a puzzle no one could solve. Was Copeland a witness, a suspect, or simply someone caught in the wrong place at the wrong time? No one knew. What was certain was that trust in the safety and transparency of military life had been shaken. As the story hit major news outlets, the questions multiplied. Reporters tried contacting Copeland's family and friends, but most declined to comment or said they wanted no part in the situation. Anonymous sources confirmed that he had served alongside Angelina aboard the USS James E. Williams for months, but the nature of their relationship had never been public. That raised a new question. Was there a personal connection between them that no one knew about? Or was this simply a coincidence in a case already full of mysteries? In Brownsville, Angelina's hometown, the news sent a chill through the community. People who had watched her grow up, heard her talk about her dreams and her plans, were now faced with the reality that her death might be linked to someone who had been right beside her every day. Esmeralda, even in grief, stayed composed when speaking to the press. She refused to speculate about Copeland or anyone else. She only wanted the truth. But she warned that holding back too much information could mean losing valuable leads. She reminded everyone that her family had learned of Angelina's death through friends and news outlets, not the Navy, and that needed to change. When asked what kept her fighting, she said, "Because I can't let Angelina become just another number in a file. She was a person, and she deserves justice." Her words echoed far beyond her hometown, shared across social media, turning Angelina's case into a reminder of the shadows that can exist in a place meant to protect those who serve. As the summer days in Norfolk stretched on, the case seemed to stall. No new charges, no updates from investigators, and Copeland remained in pretrial confinement. For Angelina's family and community, it was becoming harder to ignore the feeling that what they knew was only a small part of the story. Those closest to her insisted, based on her personality and habits, that she would never simply vanish because of an accident or on a whim. She never missed a chance to call her mother, especially on days off. That made the idea that she willingly walked away from the base difficult to believe. In veteran discussion groups, some speculated there could be more than one person involved, or that the chain of events leading to her death had started well before the night of May 29th. But these were only theories. No one had proof. Esmeralda felt the disconnect between what she was being told and what her instincts told her. She believed that if the full story ever came out, it would not revolve around just one name. It would also expose serious gaps in how the military protects its service members, especially women. Then came a second turning point. An outside source revealed that Angelina's autopsy results had yet to be released and might be kept sealed for investigative security reasons. That revelation reignited suspicion. If her cause of death was straightforward and not tied to criminal circumstances, why keep it hidden for so long? The family began to suspect that what happened to Setsate, Angelina, was far more complex than anything they'd been told. In pain but determined, Esmeralda decided she wouldn't stop pushing. She contacted members of Congress and policy advocacy groups demanding transparency in how the military handles missing persons cases. In one interview, she said, "I don't want anyone to find out their child is gone through a call from a friend or from the news. If it happened to Angelina, it can happen to anyone." Her words were more than personal grief. They were a warning about a deep flaw in the system. As the story spread, community organizations and families who had lost loved ones under similar circumstances began reaching out, sharing their own experiences. With each new account, the sense grew that this was not just one family's tragedy, but a systemic issue. Then, a potential turning point. The family revealed that Angelina's sneakers, the ones she often wore on phone walks, had been found in an unusual spot near a trail, leading deep into the woods only a few hundred yards from where her body was discovered. That detail fueled speculation. Had she been in that area for some time before her death, or had someone placed the shoes there to mislead investigators? Almost. Immediately, counter theories emerged that the shoes might have been moved after she went missing to construct a false narrative. With no definitive answer, the picture grew more tangled. The family was left in a place between hope and fear, hoping that this clue might bring them closer to the truth, but afraid that there would never be a clear answer. Esmeralda described it as standing before a half-open door, seeing a sliver of light beyond it, but unable to step through. For her, it was a painful balance between the need to keep fighting and the fear that what she might uncover could hurt even more than what she already knew. June 27. The afternoon sun was gentle over Brownsville, but no one in the community felt it was an ordinary day. Down the narrow street leading to the church, a long line of people dressed in black and white moved in. Silence. Inside, a framed photo of Angelina rested on a table, draped in white cloth, surrounded by lilies and carnations. Soft hymns played slowly in the background, mingling with quiet, stifled sobs. Esmeralda sat in the front row, clutching a handkerchief, her eyes fixed on her daughter's photograph. One by one, people came forward to share memories of Angelina, from her high school days to the moment she wore her Navy uniform for the first time. Each story added another piece to the portrait of a young woman filled with love and ambition gone under, circumstances that left the entire community grieving. At the close of the service, everyone stepped outside to the small plaza in front of the church where hundreds of candles were lit. The flickering lights formed a sea of brightness. Against the night, reflecting on bowed heads as prayers were whispered into the still air. A close friend of Angelina spoke, saying she hoped this tragedy would not end in sorrow alone, but become the reason for change, so no one else would have to leave this world the way Angelina did. Esmeralda, her voice trembling but steady, thanked everyone for standing with her family in their darkest moment. "My daughter served this country," she said. "All I want is the truth and justice, not just for her, but for everyone who serves in silence." After the funeral, the weight of the story lingered, not only in Brownsville, but in the hearts of all who had heard Angelina's name. People still wondered about those missing 11 days. What happened during that time? Who was the last person to see her alive? And why were the most critical? Details kept hidden. Those questions did not end at the gravesite. They followed people home like a shadow that would not fade. For her family, closure would not come with the funeral, but with the day the truth is finally revealed. And that day has not yet arrived. They continue writing letters, meeting with lawmakers, and working with advocacy groups, knowing this fight could stretch on for years. In the community, every time someone mentions Angelina, her story is told again, keeping her memory alive. And somewhere out there, perhaps, are people who know the answers but have yet to speak. This is where I want to thank everyone who has taken the time to watch this video and to listen to the story of Angelina Resendiz. If you believe stories like this need to be told so that no one is forgotten, please share this video and leave a heart in the comments. Because every time we speak her name, we remind the world that Angelina was not just a number in a file. She was a person worth remembering, and a person who deserves justice.